Ouamar and Baptiste, I think this is the time for you to show us what's new in the field of the load testing, or what is old, and what you are expert in. So the stage is yours.
All right. Well, thank you. Maybe a quick introduction to start first. The idea of that quick session today is to introduce you a tool, Octoperf, and to give you a quick overview to how you can manage load test in an easier way. But maybe before that, a quick introduction about us. So, as Matej said, we are a French company based in the south of France, a sunny place, as you can see maybe behind me. But jokes apart, Octoperf, it's a company existing since a bit more than 4.5 years now, with a very simple idea to provide a solution which will make the load testing an easier task to handle for the testers. So to manage this, we've decided to rely on the most famous and the most used open source solution, JMeter, because it's a very powerful solution. You can do pretty much whatever you want with it. But you have its own constraint. A lot of people will tell it's not the easiest solution to use. The learning curve is not that short, and you need a lot of time to do advanced things with it, and many things which are very complicated. How to set up your machines to generate the load, what you can do about the results. So the idea with Octoperf is to say, okay, you can rely on all JMeter strengths, but you will remove all its complexities. So you will do everything from the user interface of Octoperf. From the scripting part, we have a scripting interface dedicated to develop the script and the scenario, configure the load policy, run the test, and in the end, analyze the metric live while the test is running. So that's the main functionalities. Of course, there is many other ones. You will see them later on. The possibility to put your own SLA, to integrate it into the CI/CD, to compare results between several periods of time. Many things in the end to facilitate the analysis and the life for the tester. So that's exactly what we're going to do. That's exactly what Ouamar is going to do. Run a short testing campaign in front of you, from the scripting part to the result analysis, so you can see how you can manage this for Octoperf in an easier way. If that's, I think Ouamar is ready to start. I presume we'll take some time after the session to respond to the question you will have, so be glad to do so. Ouamar, if you're ready, I think you can go.
Thank you, Baptiste. So as Baptiste said, I'm going to perform a load testing project from beginning to end, of course using Octoperf or tool, but I don't want it just to be an ad for the tool, even though it's a really good tool. But what I mean is everything that I'm going to say in terms of load testing practices is true in general. So I'm going to perform a real load testing project. So first, I'm on Octoperf, so our tool, and I'm going to start by creating the project. So my load testing project, which I'm going to name BEER demo, because why not? And now you can see that I'm on the first phase of my load testing project, which is the design phase. So the design phase is where I'm going to create all my, what we call at Octoperf, virtual users. And basically a virtual user will be a script which will contain a set of requests, of HTTP requests. And that's those sets of requests that I will be able to play during the load test in itself, and that will stress the application that I want to stress. So you have different kinds of virtual users. So first you have the website or REST API one. So what we call website or REST API you can guess it, is what we are going to use to stress APIs on a specific platform. And it's a specific kind of script because it will be some requests that we just stress an API. It won't represent a real user behavior. It will be more on the technical side just to see if the API is working. So basically, we'll just put the URLs, configure the requests, and then launch your load test with those requests. We have also the second option, so the browser record, HAR. So that's more on the user experience side, which means that I'll be able to just browse my application, my e-application on the internet or in the intranet. And the browser will be able to record all the requests that I will generate by browsing the application. It will put everything into a file, so the HAR file, which means HTTP archive. And that HAR file I'll be able to upload on Octoperf, and it will create my scripts with all the requests. You also have the possibility to import from other kind of tools, such as JMeter, because as Baptiste said, we are based on the JMeter engine. So if you already have some scripts on JMeter, you can put them on Octoperf. And you could also work on other tools such as Postman and import directly your Postman collections, and you will get some API calls directly on your tool. So during this demo, I'm going to use the second option because it's usually the one that is the most used, I think, in the load testing field, because it will really represent the real user interaction with an application with different business transactions that we will be able to replay at the same time during a load test. So let's select that option. So you have different options to record those requests. You could use your browser, so you can see Chrome, Firefox, or even Microsoft Edge if you wanted to. But you could also use Fiddler and Charles. So for those who are not familiar with those softwares, basically they are just proxies, software proxies that you can set up on a specific computer or server. And that proxy will record any request generated on your computer. So you'll be able to record heavy client application, or you could even record mobile applications, which can be convenient. So you could just use your mobile application, get all the requests, and play them using your Octoperf. So I'm going to use Firefox because I like Firefox to record a simple business transaction on e-commerce application. So it's an e-commerce application which is a pet store, so I'm going to be able to buy a pet. And I'm going to open a new private window on Firefox. So why private? Just because since I'm recording all the requests of a business transaction, I don't want any session already opened before the start of the recording. I don't want cache already configured. I don't want sessions already configured because they won't be inside my recording if they were created before. So that's why I'm on a private window. And I'm going to use the debug mode of my browser. So by typing on F12, so it's in French right now, but in English, we'll have that same window, but you will have to go on the network tab. So in French, it's réseau, but just have to select the network tab. And from now on, any action that I will perform on Firefox will be recorded right there. So we'll be able to see that. So I'm going to access the application right there that we are hosting ourselves. So it's a pet store. It's a basic application, just like you can find anywhere. And as you can see, I already got some requests on the window below, which means that just the call for the main URL generated different kind of requests, several requests, because of course, as you can see, I got a redirection first, and I also got resources. So that specific case means that what I'm going to do is that I'm going to wait at least 2 seconds between each action, so that later Octoperf will be able to separate the request into different containers, so that each container will represent one real user action. But you'll be able to see that directly just after. So I just continue to record my business transaction. So I'm going to log in. So my username is G2EE. Same thing with the password. So let's go in. So now I'm logged in and I'm going to order, let's say, a cat. And I'm going to order it really quickly so that all the requests for the order part will be inside the same container. So let's go. Let's add a product to my cart, proceed to checkout, continue, confirm. So my order is confirmed. Everything seems okay. And now I can just sign out of the application. And that's it. My recording is over. As you can see, I have many requests on that window. And all I have to do now is to right-click on the window and select Save Everything as HAR. So let's save it locally. And let's go back to Octoperf. And I have to upload it. So that's the file right there. Okay, so just a quick note. So basically, we see that kind of recording with only the HTTP request is what is usually used in everywhere in the load testing community, almost exclusively, because it's really easier to stress an application with only HTTP requests instead of having to simulate the whole client side of the performances. Because if you need the client side of the performances, it will take a lot of resources to generate the load. So usually what you are going to do is generate the load with the HTTP request, and on the side, you can launch one automated client user on the side to get some response time that will take into account the client side of the response time. And you can do that on Octoperf also. So let's go back to our script. So you can see that I have my containers. So each container contains several requests. So as you were able to see before, I got all my requests that I got on Firefox, but each container represents one action. So I'm going to start by renaming my virtual user. So I know that what it does. So by product. And I have access to all my requests. I can see the headers that I'm using. I can see the requests that was recorded during the recording part. Same thing with the response, what I got. So you can see that at first I got a redirection because I accessed with HTTP and the application told me to go on HTTPS just after. And later you'll be able to see the same information, but for the validation part. But we'll see that later. So the first step usually will be to rename my containers so that I know which requests belong to what actions. So let's do that quickly. First, I accessed the pre-home page. Then I accessed the actual home page. Then I access the login page. So I do that so that my script is really easier to read. But there's also another reason, is that later during my load tests, I'll be able to get the metrics for all the separate requests, such as the average response time, but I also be able to get the metrics for the containers, which means that I'll be able to tell, okay, the login part took for the real user, that specific time, which is the addition of all the requests. Not only one specific request, because a real user won't feel that that specific request took 1 second, it will fill the whole response time for all the requests inside one container. But then again, you'll see that also on the load test part of the demonstration. So now all my containers are renamed. I could just replay the script like that, execute the request to see if it's working. But if I replay the scripts as it is, I will always send the same information to my toward my application. And I'm thinking mainly about the credentials that I'm using, so my username and my password that I recorded, which means that even though I will launch, let's say, a 5,000 users load test, the 5,000 users will use the same login and password, which is not a good thing because first, it's not realistic to use the same login for 5,000 users. And also some applications might refuse double logins at the same time. So I need to change that thing. So I need to put a pre-configured data set inside my virtual user. So the first step will be to find the request that is sending my credentials. Of course, it should be on the login container because obviously, but let's say that I don't know the information because the application is complex or I don't know it. I'm going to use the search function on the top right corner, and I'm going to look for the username that I used. So let's search for it. It has been found 2 times, so let's find 1 occurrence. One specific request has been highlighted, which is in the login container, which is convenient, and it's also a post request. So in that case, we'll go on the post data tab, which will show me what I'm sending to the application thanks to that post request. And you can all see that I have the username and the password field right there. And I need to change the value that I'm sending, my username and my password, which are the same, and create a variable. So let's go on the left menu of Octopuff, so variables. I'm going to create a variable. So let's add one. I have different kind of variable that I can add, random variable, constant, a counter. But in our case, since we are going to upload a pre-configured data set, the easiest solution is to create a CSV file and upload it. So let's select that. I'm going to name it credentials. And I'm going to upload a CSV file that I already created. We can see what's inside that CSV file by clicking on columns. So you can see that my CSV file has 2 columns, one for the usernames and one for the password. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to name each column, so username and password, so that now on Octopuff, I just created 2 variables, the variable username and the variable password, which I'll be able to use inside the virtual user. And it will call automatically for the value the values inside my CSV. Another thing that might be important in that kind of variables is to configure the sharing mode. So here I have the shared mode, which means that Octopuff will try to make sure that 2 concurrent users during my load test won't use the same line inside the CSV file at the same time. So as I said before, some software, some application will refuse if 2 people try to connect with the same login. So by doing so, I will make sure that 2 people won't do that during my load test. But I could also just select the private mode and say, okay, each concurrent user will use the whole CSV file without checking what the other users are doing. So let's go back to my script, to the post request, and now I just have to replace each value by the variables that I just created. So I'm going to call with the $sign because the $sign on Octopuff and JMeter starts with a $sign. A variable starts with a $sign. So let's type it. You can see that both column names appear automatically. So I just select it. And now if I replay my script, it will take the values inside my CSV file. So it's not time to replay my script, because if you see just below, I have another field, source page, and you can see that I'm sending some kind of dynamic data. It's not something that I sense myself, because I will remember typing that string. So in that case, when you are working on a script on a virtual user, it means that it's something that the application sends to you before, so before that request. And it's something that will change every time a user will access it. So in our case, it's kind of a random kind of value inside the application that the application is using to do something that I don't specifically know. But it could be also a session ID that is generated during the login. It could be a lot of things. And a lot of times, if you don't correlate that value, so if you don't extract that value and inject it dynamically every time that you play that script, it won't work. You will get maybe a 500 error, and your load test will fail. So let's see what we are going to do about it. So as I said, we need to extract the value where the application sent it. So let's find where the application sent it. It was in a response. It was in a response. So let's search for that value only in the responses. So same thing, use the search function, but only in response. Okay. It has been found one time. So let's check. That specific request has been highlighted, so just before the login. And I'm going to check in the response coming from that request. Okay, so that's the response I got. I can check the body right there, but I'm going to search directly so that I will save some time. And indeed, I can see that the source page was sent to me right there. So I need to extract it. To extract it, I'm going to go on the Actions menu on the top left corner. So just a quick overview of the kind of actions that you can perform. So you have the logic actions. So it will help you make your script a little bit more dynamic, let's say alive. So you can add your own containers, for example. If you're not satisfied with the containers already created automatically, you can add your own. You can add some random effects for the executions of the request, so that your script, every time that you will play it, it will play different requests. You can add some delays between the requests to release, for example, to make the robots that will execute the script more realistic, because a real user will wait between each action. It won't just do all the requests one after another. You can add some conditions for the execution of certain actions. You can add some loops, so that, for example, it will add a lot of different products on your application. You can add some scripts, so in different languages, such as Java, JavaScript, which can be convenient if you want to do some specific actions, such as modifying some variables, modifying some time zones, creating some timestamps. Basically, you can do anything in those languages. You can add your own requests manually if you need to call for an API in the middle of your scripts, for example. And you can add what we call processors. So that's what I'm going to use for the extraction. We have a lot of different ways of extraction inside the responses. So for example, you can extract using a regular expression. You can extract coming from a JSON response, CSS, using XPath 1 and 2. You can just check the values inside the response to check for a specific string if you need to. You can add scripts that will work directly on specific requests to modify that request. You can add a debug container, which will show you all the variables during your execution. So it will help you debug your virtual users. And you can add your own SLAs to the request. For example, you could say, I want that request to respond in less than 3 seconds. And if that SLA is not respected, you will get alerts during your load test. But I need to extract a value, so I will select the regular expression extraction. I'm going to click on the plus button, and it will add the extraction directly on the request that was highlighted before. So you can still see the response right there. And first step, I'm going to name the variable that will host the extraction so that I can use it later. So I'm going to name it like it is named inside the application that I'm testing, so it's source page. I'm going to select the value that I want to extract. So I'm going to select it by searching for it directly. It will be faster. It has been selected, and you can see that below automatically a regular expression has been created because I selected a specific value inside the response. So now, even though the value will change the next time I play that script, Octoperf will be able to get the new value and put it inside the source page variable. I can change the offset if I want. So if you check the regular expression while I'm modifying the offset, you will see that now the regular expression is longer, so it will be more exclusive. I can change several options. I could just modify also the regular expression by hand. I could extract multiple values using the same regular expression. For example, if I want to extract several different product IDs, I'll still be able to do that, and even select one random value among the different extractions. And more importantly, I can check if the extraction is working, and it's extracted one value, so it's okay. So I could just go back to the request and replace manually with the variable that I just created, just like I did in the password and username field. But those kind of dynamic values, usually they will happen a lot of time in the script. It won't be only in one request. It might come back later in your virtual user, and it will surely come back in all the other virtual users that you will create inside your project, because usually you will create different virtual users inside the same project that will do different actions. And so I don't want to have to do that for every script and for multiple times inside the same script and for every script. And as a matter of fact, if you check, so you see that on that specific post, I have a source page that starts with the letter I. If I go on the next post request in my script, you will see that I have another value that starts with the number 8, which means that the application sent to me somewhere there a new value that I will have to extract again and to inject again later. So if your virtual user is really long, you might have to do that a lot of time, and it will take a lot of time. So to avoid that, I'm going to create what we call a correlation rule. So let's go back to the extraction. I'm going to click on the button Convert to Correlation Rule right there. It will take me to the Correlation Rules menu, and automatically it created a rule based on the regular expression that will apply to my virtual user and to any virtual user inside my project if I want. So let's apply it to see what it does. I'm going to apply it to the virtual user and go back to it. If I go back to my request, you will see that if it works, automatically the source page variable has been put because it recognized the correlation rule so that it had to be put right there. And if I go to my next post request, you see that something changed right there. So the get before the post request, and automatically it added a new extraction with the same name to update the value of my source page variable. And if I go to the post request next to it, same thing. Right there, it has been put. So I saved some time thanks to that specific functionality. So let's validate the script, it's ready. So I'm going to go on the top right menu to validate it. So I can select, we are on the SaaS version of Octoperf, so we can select different load generators all around the world, because it's the load generator that will execute the request. So you can see that I have several locations all around the world using Amazon, DigitalOcean, and also Microsoft Azure. But let's keep the default setting, Paris, because I'm in Paris. So let's launch the validation. So what it's going to do is to execute all the requests one by one, record the results, and it will tell me if it seems to be all right and if it seems to be working. So I didn't talk about all the menus inside the design phase. So you have the servers menu, which will show you all the hosts that you are stressing inside your project, variables and correlation rules we saw. You can also upload all kinds of files inside the project. And you can also export your script into a JMeter project so that if you need to, or if you want to, you'll still be able to use all those requests inside JMeter, which is open source. So the validation is over. So as you guessed, when it's green, it means that it's okay. It should be okay. But when it's yellow, something went wrong. So let's check what went wrong. So that specific requests, which is a resource downloading, 5 icon, seems to be a problem. So let's check. So now that I did and performed the validation, I have on the left the request that I sent during the recording on Firefox, and on the right the request that I sent during the validation just now. So the left side will serve as a baseline to what my request should look like if it's correct. Same thing during for the response. So that's the whole period where you are going to debug your scripts if some values were not collected correctly. So I can compare. For example, here, Octoperf told me that there was a problem because I got a 404 error during the validation. So there are two cases where I'll get an alert. So if I got an error during the validation, or if the validation is different than what I got during the recording. So I got an error, but if I check what I got during the recording, I can see that I already got a 404 error. So it's not a problem with my virtual user. It's a problem with the application that I'm testing. Every time that even a real user is accessing the application, it will get a 404 error for the favorite icon that you can see inside your browser when you add a page as a favorite. Just I didn't see it because I didn't add the page as a favorite, so I couldn't see it as a real user. So that's not a problem. I'm going to let it like that for the load tests, but you could just tell Octoperf to ignore the error if you don't want the error to show up during the analysis phase of your load test. And let me check if what I did on the login phase worked. So you can see the body of the post request. You can see that on the left, the username was G2EE, but during the validation, it was user1, which is the first line of my CSV. And same thing with the source page value. You can see that I sent a different value because the extraction worked. So everything is ready. Let's go to the configuration of my load test. So let's create a scenario. Okay, let's name it. So first load tests. So default load test here is 10 concurrent users during 10 minutes. So of course you can change it. So you can drag and drop if you want. You can even add some points so that you can basically do whatever you want. But let's say that it will be really rare that you want to do something like that. So let's go back to something more classic. So we have different strategies, default strategies. Let's say that I want 4-step load tests like that. And let's say that I want 5,000 users. You'll see that automatically it will adapt to that maximum concurrent users. It will keep the load profile, but adapt it. And same thing with the duration. it will do like that. But I don't want to stress the application with 5,000 users right now. So let's do something a little bit more soft. So let's say like that. Let's put 20 users during 20 minutes. And right now the users are connecting in 10 minutes. The ramp up is 10 minutes, but let's say I want 1 minute so that it's quicker. Perfect. So we have different options because now I have 20 users using that specific virtual user. I could change the virtual user that I want to stress. I could put different kinds of user profiles during the same load test, of course, but right now I only have one. I could also change the behavior of each concurrent user. For example, I could just limit one user to a certain number of iterations because one user can work on a loop by default, just doing the same business transaction on a loop. I could tell the virtual user to work at a certain pacing. So for example, if I put between 4 and 5 minutes, Octoperf will tell the users to execute one iteration every I put 5 milliseconds, but 5 minutes. It will tell the user to work every 4 to 5 minutes so that I will know exactly what I'm injecting into the application. Because by default, if I don't change that configuration, it's going just to work tirelessly, just putting the requests one by one on a loop, which is not really convenient if I want to control the load that I'm injecting. But with that being said, since it's a demo, I'm going to do exactly that so that I will have a lot of data during my load test. And I can also change the location of my users. So right now I'm sending 20 users coming from Paris. But let's say that my application is used by different populations around the world. So let's say French people and Canadian people. To take an example, I will duplicate those 20 users right now. So now I have two populations using the same virtual user right now. And for that location, I'm going to change, for that user profile, I'm going to change the location. So we have access to the map, as you can see. So I said Canada. So let's take Montreal because why not? And it's far enough to get different results. And so that's later during my load test, I'll be able to compare the results in terms of performances for those two different populations, which are really far away from each other. So let's go to the fun part, or almost the fun part, which is launching the load test. So it's checking if my license is okay. And now it will launch servers on the cloud automatically and start my load test. So while it's launching, it will take several seconds. I'm going to talk about subjects which regarding Octoperf, but also how to do load testing inside your company. So what I did right now is use the SaaS version of Octoperf, which means that your application is stressed from servers coming from the cloud on the internet. So basically that means that your application needs to be accessible from the internet. So you might need to whitelist IPs, so cloud servers IPs. But if it's not possible, if there is a lot of security problems inside your company, you might need to use a full on-premises version of Octoperf, which means that you'll be able to set up the entire Octoperf experience directly inside your network without having to call for the internet. So we are using the Docker technology, which means that you have to download the Docker images from our repository and execute them inside your network. So you just have to launch the images. Everything is configured. You might need to change some things if you want to, if you need to, but basically there are not a lot of configuration to make. So you can see the whole platform right there. Each specific block is a Docker image. You also have kind of middle ground solution between the SaaS version and the on-premises version, which is the possibility to add your own load generators to the SaaS version of Octoperf. So it means that your application won't have to be directly exposed to the internet. It will be the load generator that will be exposed to the internet, and the load generators will stress your application, just like that, as you can see on that page. Another thing, before going to the analysis phase of our load test, is in your company, you might need also to perform load test in a CI/CD context. So you might need to perform some load testing, some load tests really early during your delivery process. And we know that a lot of time it's not convenient to have to use an application, a separate application behind the application that you are using for CI/CD. So it can be a constraint. That's why we have a Jenkins plugin, for example, which means that you won't have to access Octoperf every time that you want to launch a load test during your CI/CD pipeline. So you will be able to launch the load test directly from Jenkins after a small bit of configuration. You'll also be able to get some results, just like you can see right there, and decide if you want to go forward with your CI/CD pipeline. So we also have a Maven plugin, which you can use to connect to GitLab, to Azure DevOps. But beyond that, an important thing to know is on Octoperf, everything that you do using the UI, so everything that I did earlier, basically they are just API calls towards Octoperf, towards our API, which means that as long as you have something that can generate API calls, you can drive Octoperf from the outside without using Octoperf per se. But let's go back to my load testing, the fun part, as I said. So we are the analysis phase of my project, the final part, and the load test is running. So I can see the metrics in real time. So we have the summary metrics, which you can see the number of hits that I performed right now, the number of errors, the average response time for all my containers, so all my actions. We have a lot of default metrics. So I'm just going to show you my two most favorites. My two favorites. So the first one is the one that I'll be able to use to see the users connecting. So here I can see the users connecting. So in 1 minute, they all started to work. I can see the hits rate also evolving. So I'll see if my load is stable or if my load is dropping down at a certain amount. It might mean that I have a problem. And I can also see the average response time evolving. I can also see the results tree. So it lets me see the average response time, the percentile, the number of hits, and the error rates for all my containers, as you can see. So I can see that my login is really fast, 0.08 seconds for the French users. And you can see that for any location. But you can also see that same information for all the specific requests that are contained inside the specific container. So we have a lot of default metrics. I'm not going to show them all. You have a menu that lets you access all those metrics. So for example, I can see that for the order part, I have 32% error rate. So let's go to the error table. So the last one right there. I can see my 404 errors that we saw earlier, so that's normal. But I can see now 500 errors. So let's check why I got this. So I can see the specific request that generated that error, and I can see the error. So 500 internal server error. I can see the body of that error and start analyzing it right away. So that page I can modify. I can drag and drop any kind of charts to change the order. I can delete the chart that I don't want. I can add some text so that I can comment any charts directly right there. For example, I can add some summary. I could say load test with 504 and 500 errors. And I can add any summary items such as statistic result table. I can add line charts with all the metrics available. I can add monitoring charts if I configured some monitoring during my load tests. For example, I could check the CPU and the memory right away, right there. And the reason that I can modify all those information here is because that page is also the page that I will use at the end of my load test to generate my report. So we'll be able to generate a PDF file later. It will look almost exactly like that page. So I'm already starting to configure my final report right there. So let's say that I want to compare the login time for my French users and my Canadian users. I'm going to go on line charts, response time. I'm going to select the first location, Canada. Select the virtual user that I want to monitor and the action that I want to monitor, so login. So it created a chart with the response time for the login in Canada. So you can see that it's around 0.6 seconds. And I'm going to add the exact same metric, but for French people this time. Okay, so Paris, byproduct, and login. And now you will see that I have both information on the same chart. So Canadian, you can see 0.6 and French 0.1, which means that French people are using the application faster than Canadian people, which was to be expected because the application that you are stressing is hosted in France. So of course, it's faster for people in France to access the application. We have more latency for Canadian people to access the application because the internet is still cables around the world. So of course, it takes more time. So let's stop the load tests so that just you can see that I can export my reports. So it's stopping right now. It stopped. I can still modify everything if I want. And I will export my reports like that. Let's put it in landscape. I can export my report and it will contain all the information that I put. So you can see the text that I added. You can see all the charts that you saw earlier inside the reports. And important thing is that there is a glossary at the end to explain the main terms of load testing, because you don't know where your report will end. Maybe it will end on the management side of your company, and they might not know every term of a load testing campaign, which is normal. And you can save it as a PDF and be over with it. Another thing that is important in a load testing project is, okay, to analyze one load test, but to be able to analyze different load tests between each other. Because you might need to compare performances between different versions of your application, or if you did some modification because the performances were not good, some optimizations, you might need to check if those optimizations change the performances. So I'm going to change project, because on that project, I only have one load test, which will be difficult if I want to compare different load tests. So let's go in that project right there. So you can see that right there, I have 4 different projects. 4 different load tests that I launched. So a peak load test, a standard test, stress test, and a unit test. So with the results trends, I can see quickly the performances. For example, I could just focus on the response time evolving. But more importantly, I can create what we call a comparison report, which will let me compare up to 4 different load tests on the same report. So let's say I want to compare the standard test and the stress test, compare 2 results. I will end up on the same kind of screen that I showed you just before, but right now I will have the metrics for 2 different load tests. So I have the first load test, which is stress test, and the second load test, standard. So you can see that the stress test went up to 300 concurrent users, and the standard test up to 60 users. So we'll be able to compare the metrics. all the metrics that I showed you before are right there, but are compared right now. Since we use the same virtual users in both cases, automatically it compared all the actions contained inside my virtual users. So I can see that my second load test had better performances than my first one. For example, the confirm order transactions took less time, 87% less time than during the first load test, which is normal because the first load test went up to 300 users compared to the 60 users of the second load test. So everything that I said before is still valid. You can add your own charts and generate a PDF file. And finally, really important thing for a load test is to be able to monitor your servers, because if I launch a load test and I have no monitoring, I don't know what's going on my servers that I'm stressing, I won't be able to change anything. I will just be able to tell, okay, the response time are really high, but why? I don't know. So the monitoring part will help you tell, okay, the problem is on the front side of my platform. Maybe it's the backend, maybe it's the database, etc. So you can monitor. Just quick example, you could monitor all those technologies on Octoperf, and you'll be able to see the charts in real time during a load test and after the load test, of course, and be able to correlate those metrics with the performances metrics and tell which side of your platform is problematic. So it's over for me. It's a lot of things already. I could talk for maybe 5 hours, but we don't have that much time. So thank you for listening. And let's go to the next phase. If you have questions, I'll be happy to answer now or later, whenever you want.
Okay, so thank you very much, Ouamar, for your presentation. It was quite thorough, and as the time is getting late, so we will skip the question part, and we will let people to contact you directly, okay, to ask any questions about load testing or Octoperf as a tool. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and we will have 3 minutes pause. You can use our launch. You can talk to each other, and after 3 minutes, I will resume the presentation with the second speaker, which is Robert, who is waiting impatiently for his part. So see you in 3 minutes, and thank you, Ouamar. Thank you, Baptiste, for great presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invite.
Bye-bye.